well, joining me in the studio is Shelina Janmohamed, author of Love in a Headscarf and Generation M. And from our Oxford studio, Douglas Murray, Associate Editor of The Spectator. Thank you both for coming in. Shelina, you apparently have a burkini.
I do. It's an open secret. I've got one. It just looks like a long T-shirt with a pair of leggings and a swimming cap on top.
Did you know it was going to be such an important statement of any kind when you acquired it?
It looks like a wetsuit that people up and down the country wear, which we need in British waters because it's pretty cold, or you need out in the south of France because it's really hot. So it's not really about the form of the bikini that seems to be at stake here. It's some kind of meaning that's being imposed on it.
Exactly. And Douglas Murray, isn't that what all this is about? And in fact, you've written about this, saying it's a tokenistic thing to fixate on it. It's about the politics of picking on some symbol, however arbitrary, and making a big deal out of something relatively small.
Well, indeed. I mean, in the last 18 months, more than 200 people have been killed in jihadist attacks in France. In the last few days, it's come out from Germany that the German government is looking not only at advising the German people to stockpile essential things like water in case of some mass casualty attack, but it's talking about conscription. And here we are with the summer's big story of French and indeed some German politicians competing to out-idiot each other by talking about the burkini. This is now a European tradition in the face of a genuinely serious societal problem that radical Islam poses across all of Europe, and obviously has its worst demonstrations in extremist attacks like those in Paris and in Germany in recent months. In the face of that, politicians compete with each other and the media compete with each other about really frivolous things. And the burkini is a frivolous debate to be having. Not one life is likely to be saved by a woman being fined on a beach in Nice for wearing a burkini. And that's the reason why they're doing it is straightforward. That neither politicians in France, nor politicians in Germany, nor I would argue anywhere in Europe, are able to face up to the massive issues which they have brought about and which they now cannot answer.
Let's talk about whether you think those issues, whether you think there's cowardice. I mean, do you agree with Douglas that to some extent they're just focusing on a little thing because they don't want to talk about a big cultural war between Muslims and the West?
Do you know what? I think we do need to take a moment just to step back and imagine for women all around the country and all around the world what it's like to sit on a beach building sandcastles with your children and have 4 policemen stand around you with handguns and make you take your top off. I think everybody really needs to let that sink in. That is quite serious.
It's why we're discussing it, because it is
but
a thing.
This is not about just Muslim women. When we have a state and we have police telling women what they can and cannot wear, then we are into very dangerous territory. And I'll tell you which other organisations tell women what to and what not to wear at the barrel of a gun, and that is Daesh and the extremists. And women everywhere should be protesting at this kind of behaviour.
I'm going to put something to you the Mayor of Cannes said. He's actually had quite a lot to say about this because Cannes was the first city. He said, when I took the decision to ban people from walking topless in the streets of Cannes, nobody said a thing about human rights. Apparently he did stop people walking topless.
He probably didn't also say that women who wanted to go for a swim were somehow pledging allegiance to a terrorist organisation.
Yeah, that was his other quote. Yeah, he said it's pledging allegiance. Look, Douglas, which is the better approach to the problem which you think exists? The French approach that Sarkozy is promoting, or the Anglo-Saxon approach that President Sarkozy now says he doesn't think is right, because it means we ignore each other, we tolerate each other, but ignore each other?
Let me very quickly pick up on one of the things that's just been said before answering that, if I may, which is, of course, the parallel that's just been drawn breaks down, doesn't it, when we remember that the French authorities, grotesque as this, I think we are in agreement, is, do not then do to the women what ISIS and the Taliban do, which is to rape them and kill them. So it's a parallel that goes a certain way, but we have to keep this in some context. As for the, as it were, the competing manners of dealing with it, the interesting thing is, Evan, that in the last 15 years, we have had so many manifestations of this. Something blows up in London and people say, maybe we should look to the French model. And then 130 people get gunned down in an evening in Paris. And people say, maybe we should look in France at the Norwegian model or the Swedish model or the German model. And the fact is now is that everybody realizes that none of the models have worked. None of them have worked. They've all broken down. None of them were any good. None of them were fit for purpose. So you see, when Sarkozy now, purely for electoral reasons, obviously says, oh, the Anglo-Saxon model people living side by side, parallel communities. Look, if there weren't visual, videographic evidence for it, I would suspect that Nicolas Sarkozy has never been to the suburbs of Marseille or has never been to any suburbs of Paris, because if he did go to them, he would see that precisely that parallel existence exists in France. I would argue worse than any other European country. But it's not really a question of who's done it really well and who's done it really badly. Everybody has failed in the integration. Everybody has failed because immigration at the levels we've had it, and particularly at the levels that Chancellor Merkel has now pushed the continent into having
Douglas?
it, cannot possibly work.
Douglas, the point is understood. I want Shelina to get a reply to that. Either model, the French model, the British model, or do you agree with Douglas that no model has worked, Shelina?
The problem is when we try and stitch together ideas around immigration and what women should and shouldn't wear and the idea there's some kind of security and terrorism problem, then we are approaching the issue the wrong way. That's how we end up with policemen telling women to take their clothes off. What we need to think about is how do we enforce the rule of law to allow the citizens to flourish? And that has to be by allowing people to express their values and to participate in society. And if Muslim women want to do that by the way they dress, but actually being part of the public society, then we have to allow them to express that. That is the fundamental of why we live in a liberal democracy.
Thank you both. I'm sure we'll get back to this topic before long.